My name is TJ Dalton, and I'm the plucked instrumentalist for Grande Bande. So after our concerts and performances, I always get the question, what instrument are you playing? So in today's Line from Home installment, I'm going to talk to you about some of the instruments that you'll see me playing in our concerts, masterclasses, and other presentations. A lot of the times after our concerts, I get the question, what instrument are you playing? The violins look like a violin, the violas look like the violas, the cellos look like the cellos, the harpsichord looks like a piano, and my instrument, well, they don't really look like anything else. A lot of the times I get, is it a guitar? And the answer is, it became the guitar at a later date and time. But I play instruments for what's called the Lute family of instruments. When most people think about lute, they're thinking of an instrument that looks like this. A lute is any instrument that has a neck, strings, a top with a sound hole, and some sort of curved back. And in this lute in particular is the lute that most people think of when somebody says lute. This is a Renaissance lute, and it was popular up until the end of the 16th century when the instruments behind me took over. Now, as music adapted and changed, and we exited the Renaissance era and entered the Baroque era, this small little lute was no longer capable of doing the things that the instrumentalists needed to do. For that reason, the instruments changed, and the result was the instruments that you see behind me here. The first instrument I want to talk about is this little instrument here to my right, and this instrument was the instrument that replaced the Renaissance lute as the most popular instrument in the household entering the beginning of the 17th century. This instrument here is the Baroque Guitar. It retains the same shape as the modern guitar, but has a few key differences that's worth pointing out. For one thing, it's much smaller. It has pegs to tune the strings instead of machined gearheads. Its frets are not metal, but rather gut and tied around the back of the neck of the instrument. And most notably is how the instrument is strung and tuned. So the Baroque guitar has a similar tuning to the modern guitar that we know and love today, but it has a few key differences. The first string is a high E, just like the modern guitar. The second string is B, except I don't have one B, I have two. The third string is G, I also have two of those. And then the fourth string is a D, but I have a high octave D as well. And the last two strings are A, but you expect them to be lower than the D, but in actuality, they're a whole octave up. So this gives the instrument what's called a reentrant tuning, or a low to high to low tuning. In this case, it's high to low to high. The other way. And you strike both strings at the same time. Now what's very special about this instrument in particular, its ability to do a little of everything. It can be plucked, it can be strummed, it can be played at home. It has solo literature, as well as it can be part of a larger group as part of the basso continuo section. As a basso continuo instrument, the guitar tends to be strummed and acts as a percussive element. It's very popular in song forms such as chaconnes and folias. So the pieces I'm going to play for you today on Baroque guitar represent two different styles of the Baroque guitar. One, and probably the most popular when you think of the Baroque guitar, is the Spanish style. And in particular, I'm going to highlight composer Gaspar Sanz, who was a monumental composer of Baroque guitar literature. The two pieces I'm going to play for you are Rojero and Paredetas, which Gaspar Sanz takes the melody and then adapts it to the different song forms, the rojero and the paridetas, which are two different song forms. The second piece that I'm going to play for you today on guitar is by French composer Robert Divizet. Robert Divizet was a court musician to Louis XIV in France. He wrote a whole bunch of different music for both theorbo, Baroque guitar, and other lutes throughout his stint as the court musician for Louis XIV. Robert Divizet was a very accomplished musician, and the difference in the French style can be seen in the fact that he utilizes dance movements like Bach or Handel would have done much later and creates little suites out of the pieces. The piece that I'm going to play for you today is a bourrée from the D minor suite by Robert Divizet. The second instrument that I'd like to highlight today are the two instruments sitting to my left, and that is the theorbo, or the chitarrone as it was once known. This instrument was developed at the end of the 16th century in Italy as a response to the rise of opera. The Italians were looking for a louder, larger instrument that would be able to keep up with the louder voices and larger ensembles needed in opera. This theorbo here is an Italian style theorbo, and as you can see, it's a very large instrument. So the construction of the theorbo is the idea of Johannes Kapsberger and Alessandro Piccinini, and what they did was basically took a large bass lute and added an extra neck to increase the bass range of the instrument. They removed the double strings, so this instrument no longer has 2 strings per note. Instead, you can hear that is only 1 string per note. It's much larger, and which makes this instrument special is the longer strings, otherwise known as dipations, and you have this. instrument has a much more extended bass range, which gives you much more options while playing basso continuo. Unlike its little lute counterpart, this instrument does not go particularly high, but when it loses in range, it makes up with volume. This instrument, also like the Baroque guitar, possesses a reentrant tuning, so it goes from low and to high, and then back to low. So they hide the high string in the middle of the instrument. This gives you the ability to get really beautiful, different chord voicings and chord colors. And campanella effects like such. So the two selections that I'm going to play for you on theorbo today represent the two major styles of theorbo solo literature. The first one is a D minor prelude by Johannes Kapsberger, who is a major innovator in this instrument. It is very idiomatic to the instrument, meaning that it works extremely well, as Kapsberger was a player himself, and it kind of represents that toccata style of playing, similar to that of Bach's Toccata and Fugue that you would hear much later on. The second piece I'm going to play for you today is also by composer Robert Divizet. In addition to writing Baroque guitar works, Divizet wrote a whole collection of solo literature specifically for the theorbo. And you can recognize the difference between the Italian style and the French style in that the French style is a much more melodic, improvised prelude over the Italian toccata-y idiomatic style. The French ornamentation and voicings tend to be much more complex, and the range of use of the instrument is great, meaning that you play a lot of high notes and a lot of very low notes and low bass strings. So this piece is an excerpt from the Prelude to the A minor Suite by Robert Divizet. Thank you so much for joining me today in this week's Live from Home concert, and I'm looking forward to seeing each and every one of you in person soon.